its warm light reflecting off crystal glasses and polished metal watches worth more than most people earned in a year. Beneath it sat Julian Valenti, the man whose name was spoken in whispers across the city. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Control radiated from him the way heat rose from fire, quiet but undeniable. The mansion was secured in ways no guest ever fully noticed. Cameras hidden behind carved wood. Armed men stationed where shadows grew thick. Every wall, every corridor, every silence was intentional. This was where decisions were made that reshaped streets, businesses, and lives. Around the table sat his inner circle, men who had grown up with him, men who had bled for him, men who now wore tailored suits instead of scars, though some marks never faded. They talked the way powerful men always did, territory disputes framed as logistics, money flows disguised as investments, loyalty measured not in words but in outcomes. Julian listened without interrupting, fingers wrapped loosely around his glass. Whiskey rested untouched. He had heard it all before, new routes, old enemies, fresh opportunities. The language of power had become repetitive, predictable, empty. Somewhere along the way, success had stopped feeling like victory. Emma Rodriguez moved through the room quietly, carrying a silver tray. Her steps were light, precise. She never interrupted a sentence, never drew attention. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, her uniform simple, practical. She had mastered the art of being unseen, not because she lacked presence, but because the world preferred her that way. She poured drinks with steady hands, noticing everything. The way one capo always positioned himself closest to Julian. The subtle tension between two men discussing loyalty a little too loudly. The flicker of irritation Julian tried to hide when the conversation dragged on. Emma observed without judging. It was safer that way. Julian barely looked at her as she set a glass beside him. His thanks was automatic, distant. He had learned long ago not to see the people who made his life function smoothly. It kept things simple, or so he told himself. The comments began the way they always did. Light, casual, framed as humor. "So this is the famous one of the men said, smirking as Emma passed behind him. "The maid with opinions." Another chuckled. "Yeah, Julian mentioned she reorganized his private library. Took initiative, didn't you?" His tone suggested audacity, not competence. Emma paused just long enough to meet his eyes. Her voice was calm, respectful. "The books were deteriorating. Proper organization preserves them." The table erupted in low laughter. "She talks like she owns the place," someone muttered. Julian felt a flicker of irritation, though he couldn't quite place why. He dismissed it, taking a sip of his drink. Emma moved on, unbothered on the surface, though the words registered. They always did. "Smart for a maid," another added, swirling his glass. Or maybe she just memorized a few lines to sound impressive. Emma heard that too. She said nothing. Silence was often the sharpest response. Julian finally glanced at her then. For just a moment, something in her posture caught his attention. Not defiance, not submission, restraint, as if she were holding back parts of herself no one had earned the right to see. The conversation drifted back to money and influence, but the mood had shifted. Amusement lingered in the air, edged with arrogance. One of the capos leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with mischief. "You know what would be funny," he said. "Your donor gala is coming up, the big one. Politicians, power brokers, the usual circus." Julian raised an eyebrow. "And what if you brought her?" the man continued, nodding toward the doorway where Emma had disappeared. "As your guest." Laughter rippled around the table. "Imagine it," another said. "The maid walking into that room, seeing how the other half really lives." "It's harmless," someone added. "She seems confident enough, might enjoy the fantasy." Julian felt something tighten in his chest. He knew this wasn't harmless. He knew exactly what they were doing, turning a person into entertainment, measuring worth for sport. "It's just a joke," the first man pressed. "Unless you're afraid she won't fit in." The word afraid struck deeper than it should have. Julian's pride stirred, old and familiar. He thought of Emma's steady gaze, her quiet intelligence. thought of how easily she had dismantled their assumptions with a single sentence. "Fine," he said, surprising even himself. "I'll invite her." The table went still, then erupted again, louder this time. "A bet, then," the man said quickly. "Bring her, let's see how long she lasts." Julian lifted his glass, expression unreadable. Somewhere down the hall, Emma continued her work, unaware that a line had just been crossed, and that her life and Julian's were about to change in ways none of them could control. Emma Rodriguez had learned long ago how to move through powerful spaces without being noticed. In houses like this, silence was survival. Attention could be dangerous. Assumptions could be cruel. She wiped the marble counter in the hallway, outside the dining room, slowly, carefully, as voices spilled through the heavy doors. Laughter. Mockery disguised as charm. The sound of men who had never needed to question their place in the world. She heard her name. Not directly. Never with respect. But enough. The maid. The girl. The joke. Emma kept her expression calm, though her pulse quickened. She had lived this moment in different forms all her life. Classrooms where teachers underestimated her. Jobs where intelligence was invisible if wrapped in the wrong uniform. Rooms where wealth spoke louder than truth. She had not always been a maid. Her parents had crossed borders with hope stitched into their bones. They worked until their hands ached so their daughter could read books instead of cleaning them. Emma had loved literature, history, art. Words had been her refuge when the world felt sharp. University had been her dream. Until sickness entered her home. Until bills stacked higher than books. Until responsibility came faster than choice. Julian Valenti had hired her 3 years ago. Quiet job. Good pay. Safe walls. Temporary, she had told herself. Always temporary. Yet time had slipped by silently. Inside the dining room, the voices grew louder. The tone changed. Emma paused. Something in the air shifted. She listened carefully, not because she wanted to, but because instinct demanded it. A gala. An invitation. Laughter that lingered too long. Then the word "maid" landed like a blade. This time, the silence inside her was not peaceful. Emma returned to her small room later that night and closed the door behind her gently. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded, breathing slowly. She did not cry. She did not ray. She thought. She thought about how easily people turned others into stories that benefited themselves. How dignity was treated like a luxury item. How power laughed when it believed itself untouchable. Julian Valenti was not cruel. Not openly. He was something more dangerous. He was absent. She had watched him for years. The way he stood alone by windows. The way conversations bored him. The way wealth failed to fill the quiet inside him. He did not see her. Not really. But tonight something had shifted. When he had agreed. When his voice had carried just enough edge. She had felt it. Regret. Curiosity. Conflict. Emma stared at her reflection in the mirror. No makeup. Hair tied back. Eyes steady. If he invited her, she already knew the truth. It would not be kindness. It would be spectacle. And still, a different voice rose inside her. Not fear. Resolve. If they wanted a joke, they would not control the punchline. The next morning, she moved through the mansion with the same discipline. But inside her something sharpened. She dusted the library. The books she had organized so carefully. The knowledge that had once been her world. She touched the spine of a volume she loved. Paused. And smiled faintly. If this invitation came, she would accept. Not because she needed approval. Not because she wanted revenge. But because she was tired of shrinking. Somewhere deep in the mansion, Julian Valenti stared out at the city believing he had made a simple decision. He did not know that the woman he barely saw was already preparing to step into the light. Not as a joke, but as a reckoning. Julian Valenti did not sleep that night. The mansion was silent, yet his mind was not. The laughter from the table replayed again and again. The way the word joke had sounded harmless to the men who spoke it. The way it had lodged in his chest like unfinished business. He stood by the tall window, watching the city lights flicker below. A city that feared his name. A city that obeyed without question. Yet none of that power touched the emptiness inside him. For years, Julian had convinced himself this was enough. Control. Order. Distance. Emotions were weaknesses. Connections were liabilities. Yet a single decision made in arrogance had cracked something open. Emma Rodriguez. Her calm voice. Her steady gaze. The way she never rushed. Never begged. Never bowed. He realized with discomfort that he knew nothing about her. Not her history. Not her dreams. Not why someone so composed had chosen silence as armor. The next day his inner circle returned. This time without business urgency. Only amusement. They spoke of the gala. Of dresses and embarrassment. Of bets whispered like secrets. How long before she panics? How long before she slips? How long before she remembers her place? Julian listened. Said little. Each comment felt heavier than the last. This was not loyalty. This was cruelty wrapped in tradition. He had allowed it. Worse, he had encouraged it. When they left, he remained seated. The mansion felt colder. He poured a drink and did not touch it. His power had always been about control. But now he felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. That evening, he found Emma in the library. She was dusting the shelves with careful hands, sunlight catching in her dark hair. For a moment, he watched her without speaking, something he had never allowed himself to do. She noticed him immediately. "Is there something wrong, sir?" she asked. Her voice held no only professionalism. Julian hesitated. That alone shocked him. "Emma, there is something I need to discuss." Her eyes sharpened slightly. She already knew. "The gala is approaching," he said slowly. "I would like you to attend." Silence filled the space. Not shock. Not excitement. Understanding. "As your guest," he added. Emma studied him for a long moment. Long enough for his confidence to falter. "May I ask why?" she said quietly. Julian opened his mouth. Closed it. Truth pressed forward. It began as a conversation with the men. He admitted. They suggested it. A joke. The word tasted bitter now. Emma nodded once. "So that is what I am to them?" "To you?" she asked. The question struck deeper than any accusation. Julian met her gaze. "I do not want it to be a joke. I want to prove them wrong." She exhaled slowly. "You want me to represent dignity in a room built on power. That is a heavy role. I will not humiliate myself for amusement," Emma said. "Nor will I pretend gratitude." Julian felt respect rise where guilt lived. "I would never ask that." "Then understand this," Emma said firmly. "If I go on my terms. Whatever money you gamble, whatever pride you protect, double it and donate it to the community literacy program." Julian did not hesitate. "Done." Their eyes locked. Two people seeing each other clearly for the first time. Emma straightened. "Then I will attend. But do not mistake my presence for permission." Julian nodded. Something inside him shifted irrevocably. As she turned back to her work, he realized the truth. The joke was already over, and he was no longer in control. Emma Rodriguez stood alone in her small apartment as evening light spilled through the window. The city outside moved fast, loud, unforgiving. Inside, everything was still. She rested her hands on the back of a chair, breathing slowly. This was not fear. This was clarity. For years, she had survived by becoming smaller. Quiet. Useful. Unquestioned. Now the world had pulled her forward and dared her to stand still. The invitation sat in her mind like a weight. Not paper. Not words. But intention. She knew exactly what awaited her at that gala. Judgment dressed as curiosity. Mockery disguised as charm. Eyes trained to measure her worth before she ever spoke. Emma closed her eyes and remembered who she had been before life interrupted her plans. A student who loved art. A young woman who debated ideas without apology. A daughter who believed education was freedom. That woman had not disappeared. She had only been waiting. Emma reached into her closet and pulled out a garment bag she had not opened in years. Inside was a dress she had bought during her university days. Emerald green. Simple. Elegant. She had never worn it. There had never been an occasion worthy enough. Until now. This was not about revenge. This was not about proving them wrong. This was about refusing to be invisible any longer. The next day she met Diana, her closest friend, a woman who knew her past and her silence. Diana looked at her and understood immediately. "You are not going to that gala to impress anyone," she said. "You are going to remind yourself who you are." They worked quietly, hair released from years of discipline, makeup light and intentional. Nothing excessive, nothing false. When Emma finally looked in the mirror, she did not gasp. She did not smile. She nodded. This was not transformation. This was recognition. Meanwhile, Julian Valenti moved through his world with growing unease. Meetings blurred. Orders felt heavy. The laughter of his men now grated against his nerves. They spoke about the gala constantly. Bets grew louder. Expectations crueler. Julian said nothing. But inside something churned. He found himself replaying Emma's words. "Do not mistake my presence for permission." For the first time in years, Julian questioned the loyalty of the men around him. Not because they were disloyal, but because they were careless with power. On the night before the gala, Julian stood alone in his study. The mansion silent, except for distant guards. He poured a drink. Did not touch it. He realized something that unsettled him deeply. He wanted Emma to succeed. Not to win a bet. Not to humiliate his men. But because her success would force him to confront who he had been. The next morning, Emma left the mansion early. Not in uniform. Not as staff. She walked through the gates unnoticed. No one stopped her. That alone told her everything she needed to know. As evening approached, the city prepared for spectacle. Cars polished. Lights tested. Names whispered. Emma dressed slowly, deliberately. Not rushing. Not doubting. When she stepped outside, the air felt different. Lighter. She was not walking into a trap. She was walking into a reckoning. Across the city, Julian adjusted his jacket and stared at his reflection. For once, the man staring back did not look powerful. He looked exposed. The joke had crossed a line long ago. Tonight, everyone would feel it. The ballroom glowed with controlled excess. Golden light spilled from chandeliers. Music hummed softly beneath conversation. Everything was polished, measured, intentional. This was not just a gala. It was a display of dominance. A place where favors were traded behind smiles. Where power wore silk and diamonds. Julian Valenti stood near the center of the room. Perfectly tailored suit. Posture calm. Expression unreadable. Around him, his inner circle laughed, drank, watched. Their confidence fed by expectation. She will not last. Someone whispered. Another chuckled. I give her 10 minutes before she freezes. Julian said nothing. His eyes kept drifting toward the entrance. The doors opened. Conversation slowed. Then faltered. Heels touched marble. Slow, unhurried, heads turned. Emma Rodriguez stepped inside. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She did not look down. The emerald dress moved with her like it belonged to her. Not borrowed. Not worn for approval. But claimed. Her hair framed her face softly. Her expression composed. Eyes steady. The room fell into a silence, so sudden it felt physical. Julian felt his breath leave him before he realized he had been holding it. This was not the maid from his mansion. This was not the woman they had joked about. This was presence. She did not scan the room for safety. She did not search for him. She walked as if she already belonged. Men who had killed without flinching stared openly. Women whispered behind manicured hands. Politicians faltered mid-sentence. Someone laughed nervously, trying to break the spell. It did not work. Emma moved through the room with quiet authority. Each step deliberate. Each breath controlled. Julian felt something crack inside his chest. Pride mixed with regret. Admiration tangled with shame. His men looked stunned. One of them muttered. This was not supposed to happen. Emma reached Julian and stopped. Her gaze met his. Not asking. Not pleading. Good evening, she said calmly. For a moment, Julian forgot the room existed. Forgot the beds. Forgot the power. You look remarkable, he said. Honest. Unshielded. Thank you, she replied. For the invitation. The words carried weight. Not gratitude. Acknowledgement. She turned then, facing the men who had laughed. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by discomfort. Their smiles stiffened. Their confidence cracked. Emma inclined her head politely, just enough to remind them of their earlier mockery. Gentlemen. The word landed like a mirror. They saw themselves reflected, and did not like what stared back. Julian felt it then. The shift. This night would not belong to him. Or to them. It belonged to her. As Emma moved away to greet others, conversation resumed slowly, cautiously. But the tone had changed. This was no longer entertainment. This was confrontation without aggression. Power without threat. Julian watched as Emma spoke with donors. With politicians. With women who measured worth by pedigree. She spoke easily. Intelligently. Without apology. Each laugh she earned cut deeper than any insult. The joke had died the moment she entered. And every man in that room knew it. Julian stood still as the truth settled around him. He had invited her as a gamble. She had arrived as a reckoning. Emma did not wait for permission to speak. She never had. The room adjusted itself around her. Not because she demanded attention, but because it recognized certainty. A senator approached first. Polite smile practiced curiosity. You are new here, he said. Emma nodded. New to this room. Not to these conversations. She spoke about education first. About neighborhoods erased by neglect. About children who learned fear before language. Her voice was calm. Measured. Unshaken. People leaned in. Not because she was beautiful, but because she was undeniable. Julian watched from a distance. His chest tight. His power useless. This was not his victory. This was not his stay. This was hers. One of the capos attempted humor. So you read books and volunteer. Impressive hobbies. Emma turned slowly. Met his gaze. Smiled gently. They are not hobbies. They are responsibilities. The word landed heavy. Silence spread. Not awkward. Not forced. Truth has weight. Another guest asked where she studied. Emma answered honestly. Where she could. When life allowed. No shame. No apology. Julian saw it then. The difference between authority and dominance. Emma held authority. Without fear. Without force. Men who ruled through violence felt it. And did not know how to respond. A philanthropist joined the conversation. Interested. Genuine. Emma spoke of community programs. Of literacy. Of access. Of art as survival, not luxury. She referenced names. Places. Real numbers. This was not performance. This was lived experience. Julian felt the room turning. Alliances forming. Interest shifting. The men who had laughed now avoided her gaze. One of them whispered, "She is dangerous." Julian understood the truth. She was not dangerous. She was awake. Emma caught Julian watching. Their eyes met across the room. No triumph. No accusation. Only clarity. He nodded once, acknowledging something he had ignored for years. She returned her attention to the conversation. Unbothered. A woman approached. Older. Powerful. Someone Julian respected deeply. "You should sit with us," she said to Emma. "We need voices like yours." Emma accepted. Not grateful. Not hesitant. Julian felt the loss before it arrived. This room was supposed to consume her. Instead, she consumed it. His men grew restless. Bets dissolved into silence. Arrogance replaced by calculation. This was not the outcome they planned. Julian stood alone, watching Emma laugh softly at something someone said. He realized something terrifying. He had built his life on control, on being the most powerful presence in any room. Tonight, he was not. And for the first time, he did not resent it. Because power without meaning was empty. And Emma had meaning. The room no longer belonged to the Mafia. Or to money. Or to fear. It belonged to truth. And truth did not ask permission. The tension did not explode. It tightened. The room had changed, and everyone felt it. Laughter sounded forced. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Eyes followed Emma wherever she moved. The men who had turned her into a joke now found themselves shrinking. Not because she attacked them, but because she did not. Power hates being ignored. One of the capos could not tolerate it any longer. He stepped forward, drink in hand, smile sharp. "You carry yourself well," he said. "But let us be honest. You do not belong in rooms like this." The words were calm, almost polite. That made them more dangerous. The air stilled. Emma turned to face him slowly. Not startled. Not angry. "Belonging," she repeated softly. "Is that something you earn by birth or by behavior?" A ripple of discomfort moved through the group. The capo laughed lightly, trying to regain control. "Rooms like this are built on respect." Emma nodded. "They are. And respect is not inherited. It is practiced." Silence fell heavier than before. She continued. "I clean floors because it pays the bills. I read books because they feed my mind. I volunteer because my community needs it. None of that diminishes me." If anything, she said, meeting his gaze, "it tells you exactly who I am." People shifted. Some uncomfortable. Some impressed. Julian felt his heart pound. This was the moment. The moment when he would either hide or stand. Another man spoke, trying to soften the blow. No one meant disrespect. It was all in good fun. Emma smiled gently. Fun is only fun when everyone is laughing. The truth settled. Sharp. Undeniable. Julian stepped forward then. Not loudly. Not aggressively. "Enough," he said. The room froze. He stood beside Emma. Not in front. Not behind. "You invited her as entertainment," he said to his men. "You treated her like an experiment. That ends tonight. His voice was calm. That made it lethal. She is my guest. And more importantly, she is a person. Anyone who cannot respect that can leave. No one moved. The capos exchanged glances. Calculations replacing arrogance. Emma looked at Julian. Surprise flickering briefly. Then something warmer. Respect. Julian felt exposed. But he did not step back. The moment passed slowly, like a storm deciding whether to break. Finally, the man who had spoken first lowered his gaze. No offense intended, he muttered. Emma nodded once. Offense does not require intention. It requires impact. The words landed harder than any threat. The group dispersed awkwardly. Conversations resumed at a different pitch. Something had been corrected. Something had been lost. Julian exhaled slowly. He turned to Emma. Thank you, he said quietly. For what she asked. For not walking away. For standing your ground. Emma considered him. I did not do it for you. I know, he replied. That made her smile. The night continued. But the balance had shifted. Julian knew it. His men knew it. The room knew it. The joke had turned inward, exposing those who laughed first. Emma did not stay by Julian. She did not cling. She moved freely, choosing conversations, choosing space. Julian watched her and understood the truth fully now. This was never about humiliation, or pride, or power. This was about visibility. And once someone truly sees you, there is no returning to silence. Tonight, Emma had been seen, and nothing in this world would ever be the same. The gala did not end with applause. It ended with silence. Not empty silence. Heavy silence. The kind that follows truth. People began leaving in clusters. Voices low. Laughter careful. The spectacle they came for never happened. Instead, they were forced to confront themselves. Julian watched the room thin. His men gathered near the edges. Their confidence cracked. Their jokes gone. The bets no longer mattered. Money felt small. Emma stood near the terrace doors. Alone. City lights stretching behind her. Julian approached slowly. Not as a boss. Not as a savior. As a man uncertain of his place. You handled that with strength, he said. Emma did not turn immediately. Strength was not my goal. Then what was she asked? Honesty. She faced him. Eyes clear. Unafraid. I knew coming here would cost me something, she said. But I did not expect it to clarify everything. Julian felt unease coil in his chest. Clarify what? That I have been hiding, she said calmly. Using safety as an excuse. Using silence as armor. Tonight reminded me that I am capable of more. The words landed slowly. Dangerously. Julian searched her face. And saw resolve. I will finish my work here properly, she continued. But after that, I am leaving. Leaving the mansion. Leaving the role. Julian swallowed. You mean you are quitting? Yes. The answer was firm. Not emotional. Not impulsive. I am returning to university. Finishing my degree. Building the life I postponed. For the first time that night, Julian felt fear. Not of loss of control, but of loss of presence. I understand, he said, even though part of him did not. Good, she replied. Because this is not a reaction. It is a decision. Inside the ballroom, his men watched them, trying to read what power shift had just occurred. One of them approached hesitantly. About the wager. He said, we will honor it. Double. As promised. Emma nodded. Thank you. No smile. No triumph. Julian saw it then. She was not collecting victories. She was closing chapters. As the night drew to its end, Julian stood alone again. This time not by choice. Emma left without ceremony, without a backward glance. The doors closed softly behind her. The mansion felt different immediately. Emptier. Louder. Julian sat in his study later. The same room where the joke had been born. The bet was gone. The laughter gone. What remained was accountability. He realized something painfully clear. Power could open doors, but it could not make people stay. Emma had not taken anything from him. She had returned something. Awareness. And it came at a price. Julian stared at the city below. The same city that once obeyed him. For the first time, he wondered who he was without the silence of others. The joke had crossed a line, but the reckoning had just begun. 6 months changed everything. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Emma Rodriguez walked through the university gates with a backpack over her shoulder and sunlight on her face. She did not feel behind. She did not feel small. She felt ready. Classrooms no longer intimidated her. Questions no longer waited inside her chest. She spoke. She challenged. She learned. Nights were long. Money was tight. But her purpose was clear. During the day she studied. History. Art. Culture. In the evenings, she worked part-time at a small community gallery. Sweeping floors again. But this time it was choice. Not survival. People listened when she spoke. Not because of appearance, but because of clarity. Julian Valenti watched his world change from a distance. Not because he ordered it, but because he allowed it. He spent less time in boardrooms, less time in shadows. He showed up at the literacy center quietly. No entourage. No announcement. Children stared at him at first. Suspicious. Curious. Then they asked questions. And he answered. Julian learned something there. Respect was not taken. It was earned slowly. His men noticed the shift. Some approved. Some resisted. Power without cruelty confused them. Julian no longer cared. Emma and Julian met for coffee every few weeks. Public places. Neutral ground. They spoke as equals. About books. About failure. About responsibility. Never about the gala. Something unspoken lived between them. Not tension. Not romance. Truth. Julian admired her growth. Emma respected his effort. Neither rushed. Neither assumed. One evening, Julian attended an exhibition at the gallery. Emma had helped curate it. The room buzzed with conversation and curiosity. Voices excited. Ideas alive. Julian stood quietly, watching Emma explain artwork to visitors. She was confident, animated, fully present. This was her world now. He felt something settle inside him. This was not longing. This was recognition. Later they walked through the city together. Lights reflecting on pavement. Voices fading behind them. Emma spoke about her plans. Community programs. Education access. Bringing art to neighborhoods forgotten by policy and power. Julian listened. Truly listened. He realized he had never done that before. Not like this. They stopped on a bridge overlooking the river. Wind cool. City breathing around them. Emma smiled softly. You know what surprises me, she said. What Julian asked. That you stayed. You could have disappeared after the gala. Most men like you do. Julian nodded. I thought about it. Why didn't you? Because leaving would have been easy. Staying required chain. Emma studied him carefully. Then nodded. That matters. Julian took a breath. Steady. Honest. Emma, I need to tell you something. She waited. No fear. No expectation. I have fallen in love with you. Not the night. Not the image. Not the story. You. The words hung in the air. Emma closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. I was afraid of this moment, she said. Why? Because I did not want to be a lesson. Or a symbol. Julian stepped closer. Neither do I. Emma looked at him. Truly looked. Then smiled. Good. Because I love you too. Not because you changed, but because you chose to. They stood there quietly. No rush. No applause. Two people who had grown separately, now standing in the same place. Not a fairy tale. Not redemption. Just honesty. And it was enough. A year later, the city gathered for a different kind of opening. Not a gala. Not a spectacle. But a beginning. The building stood where an abandoned warehouse once rotted. Now light poured through wide windows. Voices echoed with laughter and music. Children ran past walls covered in color. Their hands stained with paint. Their eyes alive with possibility. Emma stood at the entrance calm and radiant. Not dressed to impress, but dressed to work. This was her world now. Julian stood beside her. Not in front. Not behind. Partners. The sign above them carried both their names. Emma had insisted. Not for romance. For truth. The Community Arts Center opened its doors that morning. Free classes. Free materials. Open access. No questions asked. Julian watched families enter. Mothers holding hands with daughters. Boys staring at instruments like miracles. This was power. Not fear. Not control. Creation. Emma squeezed his hand. This is what it was always supposed to be, she said. Julian nodded. His throat tight. I know. His past still existed. His name still carried weight. But now it was redirected. Not erased. Repurposed. A reporter approached, asking how this partnership began. Emma answered calmly. With honesty. We met because someone underestimated me. Julian added quietly. And because I underestimated myself. The truth did not need decoration. Later, as the sun lowered, they sat on the roof of their apartment. Simple. Warm. Real. No guards. No walls. Emma leaned against him. Thinking. Do you ever think about that night, she asked. Julian smiled faintly. More than I should. She laughed softly. I was terrified. I know. I was angry. I know. I was done hiding. Julian turned to her. And I was done pretending power was enough. They sat in silence watching the sky shift colors. Two people who had been reduced to titles. Boss. Maid. Neither of which had ever defined them. Emma rested her head against his shoulder. We needed time, she said. Julian agreed. To grow. To unlearn. To choose each other without pressure. Their story had no rescue. No crown. No throne. Only accountability. Respect. And choice. Down below, the city moved. Unaware. Unchanged. But for some children, inside that building, everything had already shifted. Julian looked at Emma and saw the truth clearly. She had not walked into his world and transformed it. She had stepped out of invisibility and invited him to do the same. Emma met his gaze. Smiled. We are not a story people will believe easily, she said. Julian smiled back. Then let them doubt. Truth does not need applause. As night settled, lights inside the center glowed. Art. music, movement, life. And in that quiet shared moment, Julian and Emma understood something rare. Real power is not who bows to you. It is who walks beside you.